All right. Yeah, get flexing, Doug. I love it.
Let's go. Let's go.
Let's go. Take that hill. Let's go, man. One more rep. Push it till it burns, right?
That's it. Get your workout in. Knock it out.
Yeah. I'm going to go right from here and get my workout in. I got a picture of Doug Barry in my weight room to inspire me, and he's got that look on his face like, "Let's go. You can do one more rep."
Come on.
Come on. So, all right, let's talk a little bit more about this, Doug. What your response again here when you combine an understanding of a deconstruction of moral theology, which is kind of what this article talks about, as how moral theology has been deconstructed by modernism. And so in the modernist theology, one of the first things that was attacked after the council was a deconstruction of moral theology, the tradition, the Catholic tradition, the longstanding tradition of moral theology. And so Thomas you got to think about this, Thomas, the perennial philosophy, it's called, of Thomas Aquinas, it was virtually wiped out from most of our seminaries. And so we get no Thomistic moral theology, very little moral theology from Alphonsus Liguori, going back to the tradition of the church, and we're kind of got this modern view. And the modern view is what's called process theology, that theology develops. It develops over time, that everything is moving towards this completion, right? It's evolutionary theory infused into theology. So theology, there isn't a deposit of faith that we can rest upon and surety. Everything is in an evolutionary process, including gender. This is why you hear phrases about being gender fluid, that the bisexual is a higher expression and again, the gay community, this is a higher expression of humanity, and shedding off these rigid understandings that gender and gender roles is a social construct. These are all lies. Gender it's something that it's a social construct and therefore can be changed by vote and now by surgery, which is completely false. So you take the mainstay of this philosophy this theology came from Teilhard de Chardin. You probably heard of his name. He takes evolutionary theory and he infuses theology with it. But if you combine that with a mind that is darkened with a homoerotic tendency, or even any deviant sexual behavior, you're going to get this porno theology. This is what Father Fabro was saying. Comments on that, Doug?
When you mix any kind of poison with even a couple of drops, and this is where, again, it's so important to stay so true to legitimate theology, legitimate prayer life in a disciplined way. You start bringing drops of this stuff in, and it can be just drops, and it doesn't take much to start making an individual sick. And when, everything you just talked about, the theological part of this and this evolution of theology and so forth, the bizarreness of some of this when it reaches the point when it starts to contradict natural law. Like, are we all of a sudden going to start saying that gravity now goes up rather than pulls things down? I mean, because the natural
gravity is a social construct.
It is social construct, and somewhere it's systemically racist, I'm sure.
For sure.
Because it's just a way to start tearing everything down, even natural law. The way we're affected by sunlight, the way plants need photosynthesis, all of this. Are we just going to start throwing everything out the window? Because when you start taking this theological point of this evolution that you're talking about and applying it to all these natural law pieces, such as gender, you start getting to a point when, I think you've said it well, Father Ripperger said it well, is that evil mitigates to the point of absurdity. And when you start seeing these absurd ideas, and they are absurd, I mean, honestly, there's a certain degree of nonsense that just is diabolical when it comes to trying to reorder some of this stuff. It just does not, will never work. I just got to say to people out there, this is probably going to get a lot worse. In the U.S. Grace Wars podcast, we've had several guests on that have been talking about formally approved prophecies regarding whether it's Fatima and our Blessed Mother talking about a Second World War, which at the time, at the end of World War I, people could not fathom, was not even on their radar that there'd be a second war. They hadn't even finished World War I when this statement came out from Our Lady. Okay, we have prophecies out there about darker times coming in the church, even the potential of taking the Eucharist away from us for over 3 years, 3.5 years, the Antichrist, all this sort of stuff that's out there. I just want to caution the audience. When you see and hear these things like this ridiculous behavior now that's ramped up even again from the Vatican with this Fernandez, understand the importance of digging deep in that foxhole. Like you said earlier, Dan, make your home holy, make your family holy. That's your foxhole. That's where you fight first and foremost from. They're going to continue to try to twist theology, twist nature, twist, natural law, human or spiritual law. They're going to try constantly to do this. That's what the devil does. We've got to gear up. And I talk about training all the time. I work out 5 or 6 days a week. Sometimes it's 20 minutes. Sometimes it's an hour and a half. All right. And that's not the end all and be all, but it develops a physical, natural, spiritual, emotional discipline when we put ourselves to the test consistently. All right. Some people find it in other areas, but ultimately we've got to toughen up.
Yeah, no. And I think it comes down to, again, it's gender ideology. This is what's attacking natural law. So we have to return to that natural law, the identity, this idea of demasculating the church. Now, if you're talking about trying to return to our understanding of the bridal nature of the church, the receptivity of the church, like the Virgin Mary, that is fruitful bride but virgin mother, if that's what you're talking about, that's the theology that they're kind of putting forth now at the Vatican. It's based on Balthasar's models of the church. This was very vogue in the 80s. These models, the Petrine model, the Johannine model, the Marian model, the Jacobite model, these other models, that was this theory of von Balthasar, this theologian. So that's fine. And that's part of that. That's the early church's understanding in this bridal nature. But we're not talking about that. If you read what's coming out, what this book is saying, well, it said this is, to be fair, this was written 30 years ago, but written by a guy that was has already been a priest for many years, and so they're talking about something radically different. They're talking something radically different because if you can change natural law and our concept of gender, then you can radically change our concept of the church as the bride of Christ. Yeah. That's kind of the crux of it. What's interesting is we've got secondary signs of the diabolic spirit. Something that Father Ripker pointed out to me the other day. This is from Jordan Allman's Spiritual Theology. One of the secondary signs, there's multiple. The primary signs are laid out in the rite of exorcism. Secondary signs could be spirit of falsity, morbid curiosity, confusion, anxiety, deep depression. These are the things that we look for in dealing with cases of affliction. Secondary signs as well. But Jordan Allman, this is considered one of the best books on spiritual theology ever written. It's a fantastic book. Uncontrolled passions and a strong inclination to sensuality, usually under the guise of mystical union. And so we've seen many cases of religious sisters, whether they're in a monastery or religious sisters, nuns or religious sisters, that have this, that they're being invited into mystical union with Christ, and there's a sexual element to it. And that's we've had many cases like that. And so we see this distortion. This is one of the signs, according to Father Jordan Allman, of the diabolic spirit. So this blending of the mystical union. This is why I put that article up on Teresa of Avila and the transverberation of Teresa, and how she embodies the perfect reception in the transverberation when her heart was pierced by mystically pierced and received the stigmata and the piercing of her heart. Because that's why I think we need to return back to the tradition of the church and understand what this means. And that image of her, the Bernini image, if I had time, I would have given it to Rich to put up. The image, the statue of her in ecstasy, and the angel is this little cherub has got this arrow, and he's pulling it back, and he's got this smile on his face, and he's like, oh man, this is going to be awesome. This is what we're talking about: true mystical union, true mystical betrothal. The suffering it takes to get there is tremendous. What we're talking about here, this false mysticism, that's erotomysticism, homoerotic theology, porno theology. This is an absolute diabolic inversion of it.
Yeah. And so, I mean, Dan, I know we're getting near the end. What is your recommendation for the average, everyday Catholic out there. When I say average, that's not in any way a belittling
That's
statement.
every one of us.
No, it's every one of us. We're all struggling. We're all sinners. We wake up in the morning. We got to put 2 feet on the floor and get moving. But what is the encouragement that comes from you? I mean, I just think it's that discipline, that knock it out every day. You've got to get the prayer, but I think there, to a degree, knowing what's going on, being aware, but not getting too deeply involved. I mean, I know you pay attention to enough news as far as you have to, but you don't like to really wallow in it. And I think and I've done it. I think many people have, where it's just constantly going through what the latest problem is, and then all the details, and then we've got to know more. And that can be a real downer. That can really crack your glass and make it hard to hold any hope. I say know enough to realize if you got a Category 5 hurricane coming your way, and then what you need to do to prepare for it. But don't wallow in all of the misery of all the comments and all the different aspects out there. We always try to end the U.S. Grace Force podcast with hope, with giving people kind of, what are the instructions for the battle? What do we got to do on every level? Yeah. And it always begins with looking at yourself, get that examination of conscience, get right with God, grow in holiness. But from your perspective, especially since you work with Father Ripperger and deal with, Liber Christo and so forth, what do you recommend to people? Yeah,
one of the phrases that I use from my military days is stay in your lane. You'd be at the gunnery range. My lane is here. Your lane is next to me. There's another lane 5 down there. Don't worry about what his lane is going on. You might say you might look up and say something about this guy or that guy, and the instructor would say, "Hey, stay in your lane." Right? Don't shoot into anybody else's lane. Focus on your lane. And so what's our lane as married men? Focus on our families. Grind it out right there. A friend of mine was going through, he was Special Forces, and there was a Marine that was going through the Special Forces Q course, qualification course. And he kept asking him, I've told you this story before, how do I get through this phase? It's a year-long course. How do I get to that phase? How do I get to this phase? And finally, my friend just told him, look, if you want to get through this course, here's how you do it. Become a Green Beret. Keep your head down, keep your mouth shut, and keep walking. And that's kind of my advice. Stay in your lane, keep your head down, keep your mouth shut, keep walking. Work on getting holy, working on catechizing your family, and pray. Pray. Stay close to your family, stay engaged. Doug, there's the music, there's the chatter in the background. I appreciate you coming on, man. As always, it's a great pleasure for me to have you on, my good friend.